My name is Selena Vaughn, and the night my father married his new wife, he stood up in front of everyone, neighbors, cousins, people I'd known my whole life, and called me a mistake, not just in passing, not as a bad joke. He pointed straight at me, his voice steady, and said I was nothing but a burden he never asked for. Then, with the same breath, he wrapped his arm around his stepdaughter and called her his real child. The room went silent. Forks froze in midair. Nobody stopped him. Nobody defended me. That silence, their silence, cut deeper than his words ever could. I've led soldiers. I've carried responsibilities heavier than most people could imagine. But that night, stripped down to nothing more than a daughter denied, I felt a wound that no medal could cover. And that's where my story begins. The country club in Scottsdale was lit up like a county fair. Strings of lights glowing against the desert night. Yellow mums crowded every table, their sweet scent mixing with the smoke from the barbecue line. Someone had stacked Bud Light on ice near the back wall, and the DJ switched between Tim McGraw and Reba McEntire, his speakers buzzing at the edges. Laughter carried across the hall, cousins catching up, neighbors slapping each other's backs, the kind of noise that feels like celebration if you don't listen too closely. I sat at the last table, the one by the exit, in a plain navy dress with a glass of lemonade sweating in my hand. No champagne, no toast, no spotlight. I didn't want it. All I wanted was to nod at Aunt May, pay my respects, and slip out before anyone noticed I'd even been there. For a moment, I believed I could get away with it. Then my father walked to the microphone. His suit hung a little loose at the shoulders, but he puffed his chest like he owned the room. Glass raised, he called for quiet, and the room listened. The music cut, the chatter hushed, forks stilled mid-bite. My heart ticked faster, foolishly hoping, just for a second, that he'd finally acknowledge me with something kind, something decent. Instead, his voice cut through the hall, sharp as a nail. "This one isn't my real daughter. She doesn't carry my name. My real daughter, my true blood, is Riley." Denise beamed like she'd won a crown, clapping her hands in delight. Riley, in her too bright pink dress, lifted her chin, cheeks flushed with pride as though she'd just been named homecoming queen. The sound drained from the room. Plates clattered down. A few nervous chuckles died fast. Most people stared into their drinks or folded their napkins, choosing silence over confrontation. Their silence weighed heavier than his words. I set the lemonade down, the condensation pooling on the table, and stood without a word. The exit door swung open, and the desert heat wrapped around me. Scottsdale at 102 degrees, cicadas buzzing in the trees, the sharp scent of creosote lingering from the last monsoon storm. Out in the lot, my car waited, and in its trunk, a garment bag with a uniform I hadn't touched since morning. It stayed zipped, heavy with everything I'd earned, as I leaned on the railing and let the sting of his voice settle. That was how the night began, with a glass of lemonade, a room gone quiet, and my father's words landing like a brand I'd carried all my life. The motel in Tempe hummed like a tired machine. The window unit rattling against a wall stained the color of old nicotine. I lay on the stiff bedspread, shoes still on, staring at the ceiling's uneven swirls while the day's heat pressed through the thin glass. The room smelled like somebody tried to quit smoking and lost. I kept my hands folded on my stomach, willing my chest to quiet, and instead the past came in, clear as if it were waiting right outside the door. Edge of the New Mexico desert. A trailer that groaned in the wind. My mother stumbling in after the graveyard shift at the diner. Hair pinned up. Uniform carrying that mix of coffee and fry grease no soap can beat. Me pedaling a wobbling bike at dawn. A canvas sack of newspapers slapping my side. Fingers going numb as I folded and flung. The kind of childhood that teaches you to count tips, stretch meals, and keep your head down when a door slams. He was always in and out, some weeks laying sheet metal under a sun that could skin a man alive. Other weeks vanished until the first of the month. At bars, he'd talk loud about his time on base, Let people fill in the blanks, like he'd bled for something. The truth? He'd patched roofs and hauled pallets near a fence line he pretended he crossed. It wasn't service. It was a story. And he learned early that if he said it with his chest, most folks wouldn't check. Lying there, I could feel the shape of it settle over tonight. The way he lifts one person by shoving another down. The way a room's silence does the rest. The words from the microphone were new, but the method wasn't. Same trick, bigger audience. I swallowed hard, tasted lemon and hurt, and told myself what I told myself back then. If you want out, you walk. No one carries you. The AC coughed, the light flickered, and I closed my eyes until the noise inside my ribs matched the hum in the walls. Sleep didn't come, but a choice did. I wouldn't let a lie stand where I could set a line. Morning broke flat and bright. Papago Park filled with the kind of quiet that isn't silence. Flags snapping, shoes on gravel, a bugler testing a few soft notes. Families in folding chairs clutched programs with names that will never age another day. When the color guard halted, I stepped to the small podium and kept it simple. We remember every name, every day. We will not forget. The wind took the words and laid them down among the rows. After the 5K started, I moved to the side of the parade field, where a card table served as a desk. A stack of morning folders waited, standard updates, training notes, an administrative roster for a logistics detachment rotating through. My eye caught a name halfway down. Riley, PFC, Logistics, Papago. The same smile from last night flashed in my head and disappeared as fast as it came. I set the roster aside and opened the slim case file clipped beneath it. Receipts that didn't match itineraries. A group chat transcript from the training area that read like a dare to be careless. Nothing career-ending, yet. The kind of small drift that becomes a riptide if no one corrects the course. I felt my jaw set, then made myself breathe. There's a difference between justice and scorekeeping, and if I couldn't see it here, I didn't deserve the seat I occupied. I pulled a blue pen from my breast pocket and wrote one word across the routing page, recusal, then signed and dated under it. The file slid into a manila envelope addressed to the deputy and the inspector general. Instructions clipped to the front. Independent review. Recommend corrective action and mentoring plan if findings sustain. I didn't add a note about last night. I didn't need to. The system works when we let it. When I looked up, a Gold Star mother was pinning her runner's bib, hands shaking just enough to make the paper crinkle. I walked over and held the corner steady until she got the safety pin closed. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded. If I wanted the day to stay clean, it would start with me. Words said carefully, lines drawn clearly, and every decision made where it belongs. The rest could wait. When I slipped back into the country club, the night hadn't cooled. The air inside was thick with smoke from reheated barbecue and the sour bite of cheap beer. Laughter still bounced off the walls, but it had that loose, frayed sound that comes when people have drunk too much and stopped pretending they're paying attention to anything but themselves. Near the buffet, Denise stood at the center of a circle of relatives, like she was queen of the night. Her arm draped around Riley's shoulders, her voice pitched loud enough to carry across the room. "My daughter works at headquarters in Papago. Everyone knows her there. Mark my words, she'll be an officer before long." Riley tilted her glass of red wine, laughing too hard, letting the words roll over her like confetti. I lingered by the back wall, glass of water in hand, when movement caught my eye. Paul, one of my father's golf buddies, had his iPhone up, screen glowing in the dim light. He wasn't filming now. He'd already filmed. A moment later, I saw him tapping, sharing, thumbs moving fast. My phone buzzed seconds later, then again, and again. Notifications stacked one on top of the other until the screen blurred. The group HOA Facebook page, my father's toast. His voice clear as a bell, captured and uploaded. Comments firing back and forth. Hal went too far this time. Always knew there was bad blood in that family. Is she really a general? Or just saying that? In the span of 10 minutes, what had been a wound confined to 4 walls had spilled into the wider neighborhood, into kitchens and cul-de-sacs where people I barely knew would now have an opinion on my worth. I sipped my water, jaw tight, letting the bitter chlorine taste ground me. I didn't argue. I didn't step forward. POV I carried inside. Family shame was never meant for public vote, but now it's out there, and they'll measure me by how I carry it, not how I defend it. By the time I left the club, the parking lot was nearly empty, asphalt still radiating heat like an oven stone. I slid behind the wheel and pulled onto the 101, the freeway stretching wide and vacant, sodium lights bending yellow arcs across the hood of my car. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than they should have. Each mile only replayed his voice sharper. Bastard. Not real. Riley, his true daughter. And now, strangers scrolling on their phones, nodding along. At a Circle K off-ramp. I pulled over. I killed the engine, but left the air running, the hum of the vents filling the silence. My phone glowed on the seat beside me. I scrolled to a name I hadn't dialed in months. Major General Samuel Ortiz, retired. Tucson. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring, his voice gravel with sleep but steady. Ma'am, didn't expect to hear from you this late. The word caught me. Ma'am. Even after years retired, he didn't hesitate. I swallowed and let it out in a rush. He stood in front of everyone, called me a bastard, lifted Riley up like I was nothing. And now it's all over Facebook. I have my dress uniform in the trunk. I thought about putting it on, but part of me is afraid it'll look like payback. Silence stretched a beat before Ortiz's low chuckle filled the line. That uniform isn't theater. You earned every stitch. Don't let anyone turn it into a prop. Don't let a lie stand. Walk back in. Don't raise your voice. Just walk. The truth will do the rest. His words dropped into me like cold water, clearing the fog. I closed my eyes, leaned back against the seat, and let the hum of the AC fill the pause. He still calls me ma'am. That title wasn't borrowed. It wasn't up for debate. It was fact. I knew then what silence cost. Every time I let it stand, it hardened into agreement. If I was going to break that cycle, it couldn't be by shouting or cutting down. It had to be clean. I looked out at the empty lot, neon Circle K flickering, and whispered to myself, I don't want dirty revenge, but some truths need daylight, and this one will step out wearing the uniform I bled for. The parking lot shimmered under the sodium lights as I killed the engine and sat for a beat, staring at the trunk. The garment bag waited like it had all along, silent, heavy with years. I pulled it out, unzipped slow, slid into the dress uniform. Each button snapped shut like a vow. I brushed the 2 silver stars until they gleamed, straightened the ribbons, polished shoes catching the light. Tonight, I don't walk back in to argue. Tonight, the truth will stand on its own. The club doors swung open with a groan. Country pop sputtered to silence as I stepped across the threshold. My heels struck the tile in sharp clicks that cut through the room. Every head turned. The light caught the metals, caught the stars, and the chatter collapsed into a hush so absolute I could hear my own breath. Riley was mid-laugh, wine cup in hand, when she saw me. The plastic slipped from her fingers, red spilling across the floor. Her face drained, her voice cracked in disbelief that rang across the hall. Oh my God! She is my general! The words hung like a bell tolling. Denise's smile froze. My father's jaw clenched, face flushing dark. He gripped his glass so tight the stem trembled. You staging a show? This is my wedding, not a damn parade ground. Denise pulled Riley close, eyes flashing. Don't you dare intimidate my daughter at her job. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The Corps stays at Papago. Tonight, I came to greet family. I lifted a glass of water, steady. Aunt May rose, palms striking together, tears glinting in her eyes. Then one cousin, then another. Applause swelled until the room filled with it. At the back, an old veteran pushed himself upright, spine stiff, and saluted sharp. I hadn't beaten anyone. I'd only stood where the truth belonged. And this time, the truth held stronger than every lie in that hall. Morning light spilled across the desk at TAG headquarters, pooling over the stack of files. Riley's name stared at me from the top sheet. Receipts out of order. A group chat that should never have left the barracks. Sloppy, not criminal, but left unchecked. It would rot into worse. I took out my blue pen and wrote it plain. Recusal. My signature below it. Date, time. I slid the folder into a manila envelope, sealed, addressed to the deputy and the inspector general. Then I opened the next file. Another young soldier, then another. Riley wasn't alone. A handful of kids were tangled up in the same carelessness. My instructions to IG were clear. Mentoring track. Restitution. Additional duty hours. We don't swing hammers when a course correction will do. I leaned back, fingers laced behind my head, and let the decision settle. If I wanted fairness, it couldn't just be for the ones I liked. It had to extend even to the ones paraded as my replacements. That's the only way to keep revenge clean. Let the process, not pride, carry the weight. I capped the pen, slid it back into my pocket, and looked at the sealed envelope. Last night, I walked in armored by truth. This morning, I signed with it. Revenge doesn't need knives or fire. Only rules, held steady, even when it hurts. The heat in Tonto National Forest felt like an open furnace. 110 degrees and climbing, the wind whipping sparks into the air. Flames chewed through dry brush, leaping tree to tree with a hunger that made the earth itself groan. Arizona National Guard was on full activation, and I stood in the talk. Maps spread wide, radios screaming in overlapping voices, screens glowing with shifting fire lines. Outside, the roar of Black Hawks cut the sky, their bellies opening to dump torrents of water into the canyons below. On the ground, soldiers hustled in sweat-soaked uniforms, hauling pallets of bottled water, hammering down rescue tents, handing out MREs to tired evacuees. Every shout, every clatter of gear, carried the urgency of survival. In the midst of that chaos, I spotted her. Riley, shoulders hunched, face streaked, arms straining as she lifted crate after crate to the distribution point. For the first time, she wasn't laughing at a toast or hiding behind her mother's praise. She was working, and she was working hard. Then, through the haze, I caught sight of two figures among the evacuees. The RV parked crooked nearby told me everything before I even saw their faces. My father and Denise, dust on their clothes, fear sharp in their eyes. They stood still, surrounded by neighbors and strangers alike, watching me through the blur of heat waves, watching as I barked orders into the loudspeaker, voice carrying across the valley. The convoy rolled out minutes later, children clutching stuffed animals, elderly couples leaning on each other. Safe. When the last bus pulled clear of the smoke, applause broke out from the crowd, ragged at first, then swelling. A veteran in a faded cap straightened as much as his back allowed and lifted his hand in a salute, sharp despite the years. I didn't need a microphone at a wedding banquet. This was the real stage, the only one that mattered. The thunder of helicopters, the cries of people carried to safety, the rhythm of hearts beating together. And for the first time, my father couldn't deny the truth staring back at him. The Veterans Hall in Mesa smelled of pancake syrup and weak coffee, the kind that's been sitting on a hot plate too long. Folding chairs scraped against linoleum floors, and the room filled with men in threadbare blazers pinned with medals from wars long past. No brass bands, no speeches, just the monthly breakfast where service meant community, not ceremony. I sat in the back, quiet, listening as the Inspector General gave the update no one else in the room cared about but me. Riley's case, along with the handful of other young soldiers caught up in sloppy mistakes, had been reviewed. The verdict, restitution, additional duty hours, mandatory mentoring, not career-ending, but enough to sting, enough to shape them. Exactly what I'd asked for without ever putting my hand on the scale. I didn't move. I didn't speak. My chair stayed tucked in the shadows while conversations shifted to weather and football scores. Then, from the far side of the table, I heard it. "Hal!" An older veteran asked my father. "Who's that sitting back there?" My father stood slowly, his hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders not quite as broad as he once believed they were. His voice came rough, cracked at the edges, but loud enough for every ear in the hall. "That's my daughter, Major General Laura Whitaker." The words settled over the room with the weight of stone. No embrace, no tears, just a correction delivered in public, plain and unadorned. A few veterans nodded in recognition, their eyes meeting mine with quiet respect. Aunt May dabbed at her cheeks with a napkin, her shoulders shaking. Denise was nowhere to be seen. Riley sat alone in the corner, hands folded tight in her lap, her face unreadable. He didn't apologize. He probably never will. But sometimes, saying the right name in front of the right people weighs more than 1,000 apologies whispered in the dark. The trail up South Mountain was quiet at dawn. Just the crunch of gravel under my shoes and the sound of my breath pushing steady through the cool air. From the summit, Phoenix stretched wide below, rooftops catching the first soft wash of sunlight. The desert still held the scent of creosote from last night's rain, sharp and clean, like the earth had been scrubbed raw. I slowed, hands on my hips, watching the city wake. Dignity doesn't need an audience, I thought, but sometimes an audience needs to be shown what dignity looks like. Blood doesn't make a family. Family is the people who can admit when they're wrong, who choose to stand steady when it matters. And if someone out there is carrying the weight of words meant to break them, don't let those lies root. Stand in your truth, clean, unshaken. The wind moved over the ridge, lifting my hair, carrying the heat of the day to come. I stood tall, looking down at the glittering sprawl of the city, my chest unburdened, my face calm. The climb wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was simply about moving forward, certain of who I was, with no need for witness or permission.